This week in games, we discuss what is going wrong in the games industry and how we can fix it. This is the Two Penny Gamescast. What's poppin', players? Welcome back to the Two Penny Gamescast, episode 199. I am your host, Tavin Bothel, here with my good friend and co-host. Say hello to the people, Connor Elliott.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. I don't know the reference.
It's good night.
Good night. Fuck.
Yeah. It's from one. I had it earlier.
Truman Show.
Truman Show. That's what
Harry
it is.
Truman.
Yeah. Jim Carrey. Great movie.
Hadn't seen it.
Oh, you should go watch it. It's fucking good. Anyways, Connor, how are you doing this week?
I've been good.
Good.
Been solid. Yeah.
Nice.
Just kicking it.
Nice.
You know?
All right. Yeah. My week's been solid, but it's been busy. I've had a lot of family in town. My little sister, just graduated college.
Yeah.
She is a smart one. She got all the book smarts, And so congratulations to her. We're all very proud of her. And then I was spending a lot of time with some family who came in from out of town. It was all a great time. Met my niece. I was very excited to meet my niece. She's about a year and a half old. And smart as a whip, that little baby. And I'm excited to see her grow.
For now.
And so forth.
She's
For now.
Smart.
Yeah. Not nearly enough time to play video games. I'll tell you what.
Sad. Tragic.
Yeah. Just basically only enough time to play some Stellar Blade, which I will be reviewing at the end of this episode. So make sure you check out for that. Or stay until the end of this episode. Wait, that's what I just said. At the end of this episode with that. Or go over to the youtube.com/@2pennygames and catch the breakout review for that. And hear what I have to say about one Stellar Blade.
I heard about it.
I'm happy about some things, not happy about other things. We'll leave it there. You gotta wait for the review to hear the rest. Ladies and gentlemen, this is, of course, the Two Penny Gamescast. Each week, me and Connor come to you with the nerdy news you need to know concerning the video game industry. We each come to you with two topics, 2 pennies, if you will, and we give you our 2 cents on them. You can find this show every Tuesday, 8 a.m. Central Time, youtube.com/@2pennygames, or mainstream podcast services of your choice. Now, also, like, subscribe, and drop some comments down below about what you would like to hear us talk about in the future. And in next week's episode, we'd love to incorporate a 2 pennies audience, or 2 pennies from the audience into the run of show. But let's go ahead and get into it. Now, Connor, this has been a tough week for the industry. It's been a bad week. It's been a really bad week for the industry. And there's been a lot of talk and a lot of conversations going on. And to be honest, we're just at the point to where it doesn't make sense for this week to follow our normal structure of the 2 pennies, because all of our stories that we're pulling and all of the conversations that we're pulling really all equate to the same conversation. And it's, this industry is not working right now. And how do we fix it? How can we fix it? What are some solutions that we can go down? And so we're going to start off, ladies and gentlemen, with the big headline news of the week, and that is Microsoft closes Redfall developer Arcane Austin, Hi-Fi Rush developer Tango Gameworks, and more in devastating cuts at Bethesda. This is an IGN article from Wesley Yenpool. Microsoft has closed a number of Bethesda studios, including Redfall maker Arcane Austin, Hi-Fi Rush, and the Evil Within developer Tango Gameworks. And more in devastating cuts at Bethesda, IGN can confirm. Alpha Dog Games, maker of mobile game Mighty Doom, will also close. Roundhouse Studios will be absorbed by the Elder Scrolls Online developer ZeniMax Online Studios. Microsoft, currently valued at over $3 trillion, did not say how many staff will lose their jobs, but significant layoffs are inevitable. IGN has asked Bethesda for comment. Microsoft declined to expand further when contracted by IGN. And yeah, we're going to leave it there because the rest we can kind of talk about. So this is kind of based off of, I don't even know, man. I don't even know. So let's start with the smaller guys. Big Dog and, Alpha Dog and Roundhouse Studios. Roundhouse being absorbed by the Elder Scrolls Online. Okay, cool. At least those guys get to keep a job. And closing of the other ones, that's unfortunate. And then the 2 big ones that leave you scratching your head as to how did we get here is Arcane Austin and Tango Gameworks. Arcane Austin, okay, had a really big flop last year with Redfall. Definitely did not meet expectations critically, sales-wise. Any way you cut it, really, it was just a failure across the board. But Arcane Austin has delivered good quality games before. When you think about Dishonored, when you think about Prey, which was received well critically, and I think sold fine for what it was.
Underwhelming from what I looked up, but it was still.
What were you expecting?
Right.
Like type things. So, Arcane has delivered upon games that are great and can sell, and one failure determines their entire the studio just closing down entirely. That's kind of fucked up in my view.
A failure that you could argue is Xbox's fault due to the fact that they were making Arcane work on a live service game. Arcane and live service games have never existed in the same sentence until Redfall.
Yeah.
And it's kind of hard to say how much control they had over that game coming out, or it could have had needed longer in the oven. And Xbox said, we got to push this out because they've been in a tricky position where they're falling by the wayside, particularly when it comes to console sales in regards to PlayStation and Nintendo, of course. But they also don't have a lot of their own heavy-hitting games that they can call their own. And so they probably could have been trying to push that out because they had been amping that up for, months, certainly, years, really, before it came out. And, we know that these studios can really get inside the creative process and screw it up.
Yeah.
So,
but the problem with that idea of there's just no game selling falls apart when you then look at Tango Gameworks. Hi-Fi Rush was critically acclaimed. Hi-Fi Rush won a bunch of awards. Hi-Fi Rush had a good player count. Now, granted, was most of that on Xbox Game Pass? Probably. But it's been said, I believe Sarah Bond was quoted saying, Game Pass, Hi-Fi Rush, the numbers were high. The engagement was high on that game. People liked that game a lot. I believe Tango celebrated 4 million players of that game. Now, what is a player? Is that someone who just downloaded it, turned it on once, or is that someone who actually played the game? I don't know. It's difficult to suffice. We played Hi-Fi Rush. You finished it. I didn't quite make it all the way there, but we both were very impressed by it. Thought it was a really well quality game, and it felt like the start of Xbox turning the corner.
And the thing that is compounded by all of this is that it was a surprise hit. And so often you'll hear when we're talking about sales of games, for example, Square Enix on Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, they'll say the sales were disappointing.
Didn't meet expectations.
Final Fantasy 16, I think they said that for as well.
3 million wasn't enough for Final Fantasy 16.
Exactly. And that's already questionable on its own. But when you have a game that effectively had no expectation, it was brought up on a whatever they call their stupid fucking.
It was the first Xbox or developer
Showcase.
_direct. It was the first one.
Yeah, and they just showed it and here's Hi-Fi Rush. It's a game we're making, and people took notice of it. And when the game came out, they took even more notice of it.
It was available that day.
Yeah.
Yes.
That was shit. I forgot about that. But it hit out of nowhere. And you even had them after we got this news of studios closing down. Particularly, I believe it was from Matt Booty saying, "We need smaller games that give us prestige and awards." He told this to employees internally, and that's after literally the day they closed Tango Gameworks, which just made a smaller game.
You had it.
Yeah.
And you got rid of that studio. And this is where I'm at with Xbox now, man. It's just a simply bro, we don't trust you. Everything you say and then what you do are two different things. It just seems like you've just become this corporate entity that the consumer just cannot connect with anymore on any level. And now it's just been a week of pulling up quotes from Phil Spencer, pulling up quotes from Matt Booty, pulling up quotes from Sarah Bond over the last year, and how they talk about how they don't want to impede on the creative process, how they talk about how they want their studios to have the freedom to do the things that they want to do. They want to engage with their studios. Well, you did. Well, are obviously not, because you didn't give enough direction to Arcane Austin, so Redfall was a mess, and then Tango Gameworks came out with a really great game, but you closed them anyway. So what are you really trying to do here? This is the same This is the same publisher who owns Minecraft and now Call of Duty and Candy Crush. You're telling me you can't make the numbers make sense? You're full of shit.
And Sarah Bond, specifically, she had said before that they were going to focus on not closing studios. That was one of their focuses.
After reopening Lionhead for Fable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
where's that game?
No, it's not here.
Yeah.
That's for sure. And will it ever come out now? I don't know. Will it sell well and they'll still close the studio? I don't know. Anything that Microsoft does is up for debate, is up for question. You know, one of the things that there was a video that was going around Twitter. People were angry at it because someone was interviewing Sarah Bond and told her, you know, why this game studio closed, right? Yeah. And she gave a very audible before going, like, it was more polite than that. It wasn't as exasperated, but it was
I mean, it was she understood. It was clear she understood the problem. She understands that it's not okay. But then she just gave a very non-answer. Like, she didn't say anything. She didn't give us a reason, and it just turns into this level of we're cutting and cutting and cutting and buying and buying and buying, but we're not giving these studios any time for growth. Mm-hmm. We're not giving them any time to come together as a team under our new leadership. Like, you're just continuously cutting and cutting away at these teams to the point where, like, I've been very vocal on this podcast of, like, trying to give Xbox as much benefit of the doubt as possible, trying to give them credit when they laid off 1,900 people earlier this year, and trying to say, okay, well, maybe there's a reason for this. There's redundancies in staff. Activision Blizzard King was a huge acquisition, and they didn't need that many people. But I think it's very clear as of right now, Xbox is too big for the goddamn britches, and they need to figure something else out. That what we were hoping was a good choice in acquiring Activision Blizzard King is clearly a terrible choice. There's too much happening. There's too many people to manage, and they are not equipped to do so. So now it's a matter of, okay, we need to cut dramatically because we're just bleeding money, I guess. But at the same time, Microsoft is a $3 trillion company. They're one of 4 in the United States, 3 or 4 in the United States to be that level of success. So what is really going on here? Are these things coming down from Microsoft, from the head of Microsoft? And that's where I want to jump to next. IGN had another article, I believe from Ryan McCaffrey, in which he interviewed 2 people who were formerly of Xbox, and they go with this. They chatted with me at length after the Bethesda bloodbath and believe Xbox is now too big to quickly or easily get its house in order. Quote, there is just too much surface area. You have effectively 3 huge companies at play, and Microsoft never really finished integration with Bethesda. Activision is 3 times the size Xbox was. They added Xbox 360 launched with a few hundred people. Last I heard, Xbox is now almost 30,000 people, and that growth has led to, in the Xbox veterans' opinion, increased oversight and meddling from further up the Microsoft food chain. Quote, the reason this seems so inconsistent with previous Xbox leadership team statements is that these decisions probably aren't being made by Phil. This is all getting dictated by Microsoft CEO Satya Nadella and Microsoft CFO Amy Hood, and it all stems from the Activision acquisition. The long-tenured ex-Xboxer continued, quote, the situation Xbox was in when they made this call was much different. They couldn't keep consoles in stock, making money hand over fist with Game Pass growth. The Activision acquisition seemed like a no-brainer. Now console sales are down, post-COVID recession, Game Pass is slowing, the acquisition was more costly and time-consuming than anyone expected, and the focus on fighting the FTC probably cost them time they would have spent thinking through the people and studio implications. Quote, I 100% believe this is a board-level decision. Xbox was a huge profit center, so Satya approved a huge merger. Now games are slowing, and Microsoft's stock is skyrocketing, and there is no way Satya is going to let Xbox drag it down. This is all my opinion, of course, but I'm fairly certain these are not decisions made only by Xbox leadership. And there's also a quote in here somewhere. I don't know if you grabbed it here, Connor, but basically, it's no longer Xbox. It's now Microsoft Gaming Studios. Yes. Is the big quote that was being thrown around, and that's heartbreaking. But now you have to look at our leadership and go, what the fuck were you thinking? Where were you going with this? You look at Phil Spencer, you look at Sarah Bond, you look at Matt Booty, and then yes, you do look at Microsoft leadership with Nadella and the CFO there, and you have to think, bro, what was the plan after doing this? Now, it kind of leads into the general theme and conversation that we've been having on this podcast, in that 2020 was a big year for gaming. There was a lot of profit in gaming in 2020. It was one of the few tech industries that actually advanced because of the COVID pandemic. But that had an end date to it. We all knew it was we were going to come back to some sense of normalcy. We weren't going to be in our houses for 6 months for the end of time, So you have to wonder, it's like, well, how many people can subscribe to Xbox Game Pass? How many people can buy an Xbox? How many people are spending money when they go back to work and they have lives to get to? Where was the forethought in this? And then sure, it made sense because you were making money hand over fist now. But now in 2024, Xbox Game Pass seems more like a cancer than it does to help, which is what we thought it was going to do when it was first established.
And I can't cite the exact source, but apparently Phil Spencer was like the only guy pushing for it, while there were a lot of people underneath him saying, hey, maybe this isn't the most viable option long term. But he had the concept. I'm almost thinking like Elon Musk with X. If you notice, he had past companies with the brand X. He clearly wanted it, and it stuck in his mind to the point where he overrode something that was already in the zeitgeist, Twitter. It's just this obsession with their vision and inputting that over reason.
I'm not going to go so far as to compare the two, but
same concept, different people, same concept of being short-sighted,
different
with
levels
your
of
vision.
Success too. Game Pass was way more accessible than X has ever been.
Yeah, that's true. And we're throwing around a lot of big names: Matt Booty, Sarah Bond, Phil Spencer, of course, Satya Nadella, Amy Hood. All of these people make tons of money.
Yeah.
And why would they make these decisions? Why would they acquire Activision Blizzard? It's because they saw money in it. And I've always mentioned this when it comes to layoffs, when it comes to studio closures. It's to look at the people who are at the top, and first of all, thinking to yourself, you're all making collectively tons of money. Probably every single year, you make more than some of your games do. Probably more than Hi-Fi Rush did. You can't take a pay cut, Is that something that's at least thought of before you go directly to closing an entire successful studio?
Or let's, even though I don't want to, let's give them a little bit of a benefit of the doubt and say Phil Spencer did take a pay cut. Tell us.
Yeah.
Tell us that you've taken a pay cut. Tell us that I'm several $1 million short this year because I wanted to try and keep Tango Gameworks alive, and it still didn't work out.
And the fact they didn't say anything means they probably didn't take a pay
do
cut.
that. Yeah.
No. And the other thing that I was going to point at is this article tries to say, hey, it's the head of Microsoft that's really causing this trickle-down effect to screw over all of these employees and close these studios. And obviously, the same article goes on to say, Phil Spencer has his role to play in this as well.
Of course he does.
Yeah, of course. Because at the end of the day, these people, particularly the people in Xbox, Matt Booty, Phil Spencer,
Sarah
Bond, blanked on that. When you're in the positions you're in, and you have these massive changes hit your company, you're responsible. Regardless of whether it's really your fault or if most blame can be placed on you, you're in the position where you're the face, the head of Xbox. So anything that happens with Xbox is on you. And, they have to have power within the company. They're not just, peons that do and say whatever their masters tell them. They have to have some level of control. And it from what I see, it doesn't seem like they flaunted it in any positive direction.
I mean, even with their handling of Arcane, with Redfall, like it just seems like you guys are just not being hands-on enough in the control of your own company, and it's leading to these mistakes. And there was a conversation today of like, does Phil Spencer need to go? I don't know. I don't know. The public persona of Phil Spencer, and he's always in front of a camera, and he's always giving us great interviews and so forth. He does seem like a good guy, a nice guy, and a guy who wants the best for the company, but he just doesn't seem like the right choice. But who is the right choice? You look around the entire industry, and this is the same problem, plaguing it again and again and again. We move on to another story that happened today. Square Enix is doing some layoffs via VGC. Do you have from Andy Robinson? Square Enix, according to people who are in attendance, Square Enix president Takashi Kiryu said that both that both the company's American and European arms would be hit with layoffs, which will happen over the course of the next month. The scale of the layoffs wasn't shared, but staff were told that people working in publishing IT, and Square Enix's collective indie games division will be predominantly affected. Kiryu was also appointed as the Final Fantasy firm's new boss in June 2023, has been enacting a large-scale reorganization of Square Enix's development efforts in an effort to reverse recent disappointing sales of its biggest games. In Japan, Square Enix recently promoted a new group of creators to its executive officers and placed checks on producers' influence over individual projects, according to Bloomberg. And that this was part of a bigger news story that we'll get into in a minute, but this just goes to show that, like, nobody's doing this right. Everybody seems to be failing across the board. We are buckling under our own weight here. We're not making enough money, or at least the money is not going to the right places. And it's affecting thousands upon thousands of people in ways that we can't afford this type of loss. This industry is in grave danger at this point in time. Like I can't imagine like we're looking at a video game crash like we saw in the 80s. Like this is bad. And let's go ahead and jump into what Square Enix's new plan is here. It appears Square Enix has just chosen to go multi-platform fully. No more exclusive deals with PlayStation, Xbox, etc. In its earnings report released earlier today, the publisher shared plans to increase profits, stating that it will, quote, aggressively pursue a multi-platform strategy that includes Nintendo platforms, PlayStation, Xbox, and PCs. Right now, Square Enix's biggest games like Final Fantasy 16 and Final Fantasy 7 Rebirth have been restricted to PlayStation, with PC releases for select titles, including Final Fantasy 7 Remake Intergrade, following some time after console launch. However, smaller new releases like the forthcoming Visions of Mana are seeing simultaneous releases on Xbox. The company wrote that it hopes bringing its major franchises, including its back catalog, to more platforms will, quote, build an environment where more customers can enjoy our titles. It's a policy Xbox has started to pursue, releasing its exclusive rights on other platforms like Grounded and Pentiment on Switch, and highly prized but ill-fated Hi-Fi Rush to PlayStation 5, alongside Sea of Thieves, of course. And so, basically, this is just a general conversation that we need to talk about here. I believe you mentioned it already in this podcast. Final Fantasy 16, Final Fantasy 7 Rebirth are not meeting expectations. What were the expectations? But take it even broader than that. What has Square Enix been doing lately? They've been releasing mad games, crazy amount of games, and none of them seem to be keeping any type of bar quality up. You look at Forspoken. You look at, what was it? The Blind Man that released years ago. I mean, like, you could run down the list of Square Enix games in the last couple of years that just seem nonsensical. Who are buying these games? Why are we investing in these games?
Weren't they the ones who made Ball on Wonderlands as well? Weren't they
I believe so.
I believe they were as well. But I mean, it's just a lack of direction. You just want to throw games out here and there, and in a time where the AAA titles take
Square Enix Ball and Wonder World 2021.
Where AAA titles take much more time and energy and effort and money to make, you just got to be more careful.
Right.
Because they're, one of the other
and
parts.
And it's easy for guys like us to say that, Connor. But now, I mean, we're just at a period of time where, all right, the question has to be raised. Does exclusivity need to die?
It probably should have died years ago, realistically. Because when you get exclusive, really, I think it's tied to console sales. They want to be able to pair their new console with the next newest games. It's why, PlayStation is well known for being the exclusive console exclusive game maker with God of War, with Last of Us, and now they're kind of going into PC now as well. Even PlayStation, who has always been criticized for being very possessive of their IPs. And that's all. This is all good news if it wasn't coming with also layoffs.
Yeah.
I mean, do they need to happen? Because with Square Enix, they didn't do the sales for Final Fantasy 7 Rebirth. They said it was below expectations. They did it for Final Fantasy 16 as well, correct? They didn't do sales.
We knew somewhere around the realm of 3 million when they said that 16 was a failure, and we know Rebirth is selling better than 16, but it's selling way shorter of Remake. Now, what does that mean? It's selling shorter than Remake. What were your projections for Rebirth? I don't understand, because to me, of course, Rebirth was going to sell less than Remake. It's a sequel. You've chosen to take a beloved game, break it up into 3 different parts. It's a sequel, so nobody new is going to be playing this game because they didn't play the last one. You pissed a percentage of people off with your creative choices of the first one. I don't think that had a dramatic effect on it, but it is something to note. On top of that, it launched on the PlayStation 4 in 2020 when everybody was at home buying and spending on video games. Yeah, a lot more people were going to give Remake a shot than they would have otherwise. On top of the fact the PlayStation 4 player base is much larger than the 5's. Of course these numbers were going to be smaller. You were expecting to do that again? And on top of that, what if someone bought Remake, didn't like it?
Yeah, and all of these are good points to make.
And the games are 4 years apart. You don't remember what happened.
And the consistent thread is, what do you guys expect? Because they do that more than I think than any other company.
Yeah.
From what I hear, it seems like every big game they release, it's below expectation.
Yeah.
You have to set a bar and have it publicly known to be satisfactory for this to be the response to it. I mean, clearly the focusing on making it more multi-platform just makes common sense. People have been asking for that for years, but
especially when Final Fantasy 15, I believe, is still the highest selling title in the franchise,
Xbox,
multi-platform.
Yep, mm-hmm.
It went to Xbox, it went to PC day one. Alongside PlayStation, and so I think this strategy from Square Enix is sound. I think it makes sense. Hey, games will sell more if they're on more platforms. That's just simple math. You increase your players count, your player base, you're going to have more sales.
While also focusing on specific games that you want to make, the good ones.
On top of and building off of that, maybe the reason we're seeing fledgling sales for 16, and 7 Rebirth is because you're putting out a lot of Final Fantasy.
Yeah.
It's been one a year for pretty much the last, 4, 5, 6 years. When you think about Final Fantasy VII Remake, Final Fantasy Crisis Core Reunion, Final Fantasy Strangers of Paradise, Final Fantasy 16, and now Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, that's 5 games. And they've been pretty much one after the other every single year. And they're not small games. They're not. They take a long time to play, and players just aren't done with them. And so they're not ready for the next one. We need to miss Final Fantasy more and more. If I were to guess, they're gonna put the pedal to the metal on this next Final Fantasy VII game. It's gonna be a while before we get 17. And even when we do get 17, it's gonna be a while after whatever the 3rd remake game is. Because I think they want to get this out of the way and gone and past it, so that they can then now focus on a new direction for Final Fantasy. Because I don't think 16 was it. I think they tried with 16, and either it was how they marketed the game, either it was the position and timing of the game, or it was just the game itself. It didn't seem to click with players. It didn't seem to set the world on fire like they were probably hoping it would. And you jump out. My worry is that this is going to connect also to other franchises that we've been seeing quite a bit of. Resident Evil. We've been getting a good amount of Resident Evil games, but usually it's every other year at the pace they've been going. Sometimes we get a back-to-back like Resident Evil 2 into Resident Evil 3. I think from 3 straight into Village, right? And then there was a break between Village and 4.
Yeah.
And it sounds like Resident Evil 9 is just around the corner. Are we doing too many games at too high of a quality, and we need to trim those down and focus them down? Do we need to start making smaller games? I don't know. You look at Ubisoft with Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown. That's not doing anything, despite the critical acclaim. So what is the solution here? I don't know. One thing I do think does need to happen, though, is subscription services don't work in this medium, at least with how the business works. I think Xbox Game Pass needs to go. Because at this rate, I think it's just hurting us. We're not getting the big chunk of sales back because all these players are just hitting that $10 subscription fee like you and I and playing the game essentially for free, because we're not paying the $70 for that. Connor, you've been a big criticizer of the $70 increase. man, I think at this rate, I think we should be lucky it's not 80, you know? Especially because it was at 60 for so long. Like, I don't even think $70 is getting it done.
But, well, that's tied with two things. First of all, I'll say it again, expectations.
Yeah.
You know, how much money is that? I don't even fucking know. Not a clue. With Game Pass, I mean, it makes sense. I bought 3 games recently. I bought Hi-Fi Rush, Persona 3 Reload, and Senua's Sacrifice. Hellblade, Senua's Sacrifice. If I had to buy, as I would for most games, each of those games, that'd be a lot of money just from me going to Xbox. As a whole catalog of games, you're really missing out on a lot of revenue by focusing too much on Xbox Game Pass.
Yeah.
But at the same time, we think the solution is to make smaller games because game takes so much longer to make. This is undermined by Hi-Fi Rush. It's a smaller game. It's not like a AAA game. It's not an indie game. It's kind of in between, kind of what you would expect the direction to go with all of these, all of this money being put behind these big projects and then them failing, and then you seeing layoffs inevitably come after the fact. Well, we had the standard, or what should have been the standard, and that still didn't work. Yeah. So I really do think it comes down to a trust issue on what these companies are expecting. And, do you need to close down the studios also? Can you not just let Tango Gameworks go? I mean, you just bought Activision Blizzard for a ton of fucking money.
I'm sure that's complicated because Tango is owned by Bethesda, which is subsidiary under subsidiary under subsidiary. So I'm sure it gets complicated that way.
But you own it now, so who knows? I don't.
Let's move into. We're talking about something that I thought of. So not that. We're talking about expectations and sales expectations. Games are taking longer than ever to make. So it's taking a long time to get any type of product out, and they're only costing more and more because of it. So the revenue they're getting back isn't not up to snuff. So you have to wonder, well, why are they taking so long? And for the most part, it's because of high fidelity in our games. The art just takes a long time to get these art assets in with that level of detail and that level of fidelity. We're talking increased pressure on gaming systems, PC systems, GPU systems, with decrease in loading times and packing each game with as much bombastic explosions as possible. Do we, as the gaming audience, need to reset our expectations for what the scale of games can or should be in order to get a better balance of quality of games? I say this because you look at console generations of the past, and I'm talking really before the PlayStation 4. There were 3 Mass Effect games on Xbox 360. There were 3 Uncharted games and a Last of Us on PlayStation 3. There were 3 God of War games spread over the last half of the PS2 and the first part of the PlayStation 3. As of right now, we're only getting one of those entries per generation at this rate. So do we, as a gaming audience, just need to be more okay with games not looking as good as they have been looking or playing as good as they have been playing in order to get more of them, so more revenues going through, but also we get more of the things we love? Because I'll be honest, if I could get a Mass Effect trilogy within 6 years like I did back in the day, I would fucking love that. I wouldn't care that the game looked like it came out in 2007. I would just be happy that it's there.
That's all well and good. The issue is as technology advances further and the things you can do with gaming increases, and it's going to keep increasing.
Yeah.
Futuristically, you can maybe put yourself in a virtual world, a complete virtual world, like they have in fucking animes nowadays. Who fucking knows? But this creation of new technology, when it comes to the people who make the games, want to take advantage of that. And even if they don't want to, the big game studios definitely want to.
Yeah.
So it's kind of, the onus is on them, on whether they want to go back to the time where we're not so, high fidelity and we're not making these big, large open world games.
Well, something needs to happen to either bring in more revenue or shorten up development time and cost in that realm. There were quotes from, I believe both of them were from EA. The first one specifically was definitely EA of, do we need to start implementing advertising, real world advertising into our video games? I don't know. maybe it's not something that's never been done before. I would certainly hate it if fucking Burger King showed up in the next Jedi game. But there's car ads in your Avengers movies. There's speaker ads in your Mission Impossibles. You know what I'm saying? So like, or TV ads and those things. So like,
what you're saying is not intrusive ads.
Or as less intrusive as possible.
Intrusive in the sense of like the joke people were making is you're playing a game and a YouTube equivalent ad pops up. And
no, I'm not
game.
saying that.
Yeah.
I am saying similar to, it's funny. I watched a live stream this week of Spider-Man Web of Shadows. There's a 5-gum billboard in that game. Maybe that. Maybe Spider-Man doesn't have make-believe ads on the billboards anymore. Maybe it is a Sony ad. Maybe, downtown, what is that called? Downtown New York? The square? The big square? What is that
Times
called?
Square?
Times Square. Maybe Times Square has a fucking trailer playing on one of the screens. Maybe no audio, maybe just visual or something like that. Maybe let's get even more creative with it. The radio calls in games like Spider-Man, they kind of play like news broadcasts / podcasts, things like that. Those have ads usually where they say, all right, and now time to pay the bills, guys. Let me talk to you about DraftKings, and it's a real DraftKings ad, but inside the video game under the guise of a podcast. Just a way to like implement it within the world. This gets tricky depending on what type of world you're in. Of course, it doesn't work for a Final Fantasy. It doesn't work that way for a Dead Space. Not really, But like maybe we just have to sacrifice a little bit of our immersion in order to get the money in.
This is all with the caveat of, is that still going to make them say, well, we're not going to lay off people anymore?
Well,
because they increase
and even then, the ads don't have to be there forever.
No.
Death Stranding had Monster Energy in it. It's not there anymore. They patched it out. I think it's a Japanese energy drink now. But like it's that same idea of like, okay, now we can rotate the ads out. And so whenever a game gets a big update that players are going to come back into, hey, let's sell some ad space. Let's rotate these ads out, so on and so forth. Your live service games. Why does Apex Legends not have ads running on the big billboards when you're running around the map? Why?
It's one of the things that helps those live service games make a little bit more money, because you see a lot of studios still trying to get into the live studio market. Remedy, they had one of theirs they just canceled, Kestrel. Yeah. It was in pre-planned phase, no longer happening. A bunch of their other stuff is still happening.
Probably just a smart choice on Remedy's part.
Yeah, exactly, because those games have shown to be not the most viable thing. Redfall is the most relevant to the conversation right now, but then you can point to things like Marvel's Avengers. You could even point to things like Hibbity Doo-Dah. Pick one. A lot of them have failed, come and gone. And maybe ads are a way to keep those sustainable. Maybe, as you were saying, that is a good way to just get a little bit more.
Just something here. I like in games where it makes sense. I'm more than willing to let it go. And like it'd be weird to see a fucking Burger King ad in my Final Fantasy VII. It'd be fucking weird. I don't know how you would implement that. But your creatives are smart people. They can figure it out, and these can be part of the conversations. Hey, spoilers for Final Fantasy VII Remake Part 3. We're gonna go back to Midgar. Right? Mm-hmm. Maybe there's a billboard advertisement playing on Midgar, and it's for the new Kia or something, the new Ford truck or something like that.
Yep.
Or there's posters on the wall of these things. Like, can we get creative with this to kind of generate things so we don't have to go through this? Does it suck? Yes. Would I rather us live in a perfect world and artists just get to create without these restrictions? Of course. But that's not the world we live in. We live in a capitalistic society, so we need to start figuring out ways to get ad space in here. And I'll be honest, these live service games, yeah, sure, fuck it. When I boot up the game, pop up a Burger King ad that I have to wait 3 seconds before I can close. Fine. Whatever. It's intrusive, it's annoying. I'd rather it not happen. But for games that are always happening and never going away. Your War Zones, your Grand Theft Autos, your Apex Legends, your Fortnites, things like that. Hey man, if that's what it takes, that's what it takes. I'd rather that than lose studios like Tango Gameworks.
But once again, the issue is that going to actually prevent it from happening? Because they increased the price of games that predated before we got all of these layoffs and closures and whatnot. Didn't seem to help jack shit. Even though the justification was for, we need to pay our people more. Games cost more to make. And it just doesn't really make sense now. As well as big studio acquirements, We covered a lot of the stuff that was going on with the acquisition of Activision Blizzard. Mm-hmm. And we were kind of we weren't, woohoo! We weren't one of the, people who were shitting on it the entire time. We were skeptical, but we saw some pros and cons to it. I think now we just need to focus on the cons, because clearly this is connected to all the layoffs. And is it worth it?
With Xbox specifically, it's crippling. It's crippling Xbox.
It is, yes. So no more to that. No more to, laying off people. Easier said than done. All of this is easier said than done, because there's no guarantee it's actually going to result in any kind of, tangible change. It sucks.
Yeah, it fucking does. On top of that, there was a conversation from some exec somewhere about how game devs are excited about the use of AI in video games and so forth.
I don't think they particularly are.
I don't know. It's a complicated conversation, and the genie is out of the bottle already. Like, AI is not going anywhere.
They're excited about eliminating the grunt work, not the artistic part of games, the art that you do in there.
And that's the tricky balance that we need to find, is at what point is it it's cutting all of the grunt work, all of the hard time, cutting down on the time of development, but isn't replacing somebody's job, because of course I'd rather have a job than let a machine do it, or I'd rather have a human than a machine do it. But if there are ways in which we can use this technology to cut down development time, that's a plus for everybody. One, it's less cost on the publisher, because they don't have to pay their people's salaries for as long as they need to, or as long as they would need to otherwise. The creatives don't have to stand on one project all for 5, 6, 7, 8 years. They can move on. They can do something else. They can jump to a new game, or they can create a new IP in some form. And it's better for the players, because then now we get our games faster. What compromises are we as humans willing to make to get this to work? And what things are we drawing hard lines on? It's a conversation we just need to have. I don't want someone to lose their job to a machine. That's a hard line for me. I don't want the machine creating the art, because you can tell the difference. But I also don't want an artist to pour their heart and soul into a project for 7 years and then lose their job, regardless of critical acclaim or monetary success, which is happening now. So, okay, maybe we need to find a better balance here. Maybe we just need to pull a little bit from everything here. We need to shrink down the size of our scales. We need to be okay with a pullback in fidelity. We need to be okay with ads being integrated. We need to be okay with a little bit of AI implementation. Maybe just a little bit of all these things will be the formula for success. But I mean, it's clear, as of what we've been saying right now, we are not succeeding at all. We are failing and falling, and in a fabulous way. It's fucking
fabulous is too positive of a word.
Do you feel like it's still worth going to this article that you pulled, or have we kind of...
I think so, because we've been talking, and as much as we like to think we're good at this, we're not in the industry.
We are stupid. Yeah. First and foremost, we don't know what we're talking about. We're observing the field and commentating about it. What can we say and hear about it? But yeah, all right. So let's go ahead and jump over here. We've got a games industry article from, who is this? Brendan Sinclair. Go ahead, take it away here, Connor. This is your thing.
These are from comments from the co-founder of Devolver Digital. Devolver co-founder says large-scale game dev, quote, crushing under its own weight a little bit, end quote. The developer co-founder... Oh, mind going down.
Oh, sorry.
No, you're good. It's been difficult. It's been a difficult stretch for the industry. So when we speak with Devolver Digital, co-founder Nigel Lowry at the Game Developers Conference, our first question is fairly open-ended. What is happening? Lowry mentions the well-established impact of the industry's pandemic boost receding, but believes there have been compounding factors impacting different aspects of the industry as well. Quote, there's us on maybe the smaller to medium-sized end, but on the larger end, it feels like it's crushing under its own weight a little bit, Lowry said. The consumers are so tied up in some of these really fantastic live service games, but there's only so much time they can spend. So there are more and more huge games being launched, asking for an enormous amount of time, but there's just not that much time available for people to play, end quote. It's fairly common to talk about the indie space, where Devolver operates, and the AAA space as distinct markets where competition is less direct, but when the bottleneck is game players' time and not their money, we ask if that distinction becomes less relevant. Quote, that's what we've talked about a lot internally, Lowry acknowledges, adding, we avoid big games obviously because the momentum they'll have in the press and with influencers, but then you also have to think of the consumers. Helldivers is an excellent example. I play a lot of Helldivers with coworkers and friends. It's hard to pull people away from such a fantastic experience. You're really fighting for time. I don't care if you're a one-person, self-published studio or someone that has 1,000 people making a live service multi-generational game, you're still competing for that player's time. And you may have a very interesting game, but to still competing for that player's time, for a very interesting game, but to pull them away from whatever for the 2 hours or 20 hours a week they have to play games, you have to make a pretty compelling case. I think we're all competing with each other, end quote. While the audience has always had limited hours in the day for gaming, Lowry said indie publishers are freeing that competition more acutely these days. Quote, there's a combination of more and more opportunities. I think it's great for developers to sign with a partner, whether it's an investor, a publisher, or to find someone to help them self-publish like a consultant. There are many great opportunities, which just then breeds more competition. We want everyone to do well. But the fact remains, it's competition for time and competition for getting in front of people. It's getting tougher and tougher to set yourself apart and make a clear argument as to why you should spend time with this game versus that game for sure. End quote. One avenue that some indies found success with in recent years was launching into subscription services, where an upfront payment from the service would take enough of the risk out of a project, make the possibility of undermining future sales less of a concern for developers. But one trend Lowry has noticed is that the deals tend to be included in those services are getting worse over time, even as the growth of offerings like Xbox Game Pass has tapered off. Quote, a lot of it seems a little obtuse on how many people are actually using them, Lowry says. Every once in a while, you hear how many subscribers these services have, so you don't really know. And you don't know how active they are. Are they part of a larger service? Some of these companies have multiple things outside of games, and their subscription service also encompasses music or movies and things like that, end quote. And while he concedes that they can be a great deal for consumers who pay $10 or so a month for a library of quality games that they're never going to play all the way through, with more being added from time to time, he doesn't think it's quite so appealing for people who still want to sell their games apart from such services. Quote, on the developer side, then you have to convince people to put down money for your game rather than the service with 100 or 200 games to play, Lowry says. That does cause a little bit of a problem, end quote. Devolver's solution for now is to put its game in subscription services only after they've been out for a certain length of time. Quote, we still really strongly believe in selling games first, because over the past 15 years, we know there's an audience to buy these games, Lowry says. And we're looking at more subscription, more for the longer tail, the people on the edge of things who are never really going to jump in at $40 or $30 or $20. But they're willing to try it. Maybe buy something cosmetic or something like that. We're looking at it more as a long tail thing now, and my hope is that's where the industry is going, end quote. That's just a preference, though, as Lowry specifies the company will consider after other approaches. Quote, we're not ruling out day one subscription services, he says. It depends on the kind of game it is and the audience you're going for, too. Most of our games, we would prefer to sell the units first, end quote. He notes that Devolver was the original publisher of Fall Guys, and the company did allow that in a subscription service at launch. Quote, one of the ideas that there was that game needs a lot of people to play it right off the bat, or So we did a deal with PlayStation and brought it to PlayStation Plus day one, Lowry says. So that makes a lot of sense to us. It is a balance, but it depends on the game. Having heard some indies at GDC talking about skipping Xbox and PlayStation because there just isn't much of an audience for indies on those platforms if you can't get included in their subscription services, we asked Lowry about how healthy the console ecosystems are for indies these days. He echoes the indies we heard from in acknowledging that Switch stands apart from Xbox and PlayStation on this front. Quote, they've created an ecosystem, and therefore a user base that is really open to interesting concepts and gameplay ideas, Lowry says of Nintendo. The PlayStation and Xbox user, for as long as I've been doing this, there's a lot of people that still felt like indie games, don't get me wrong, Cult of the Lamb has done very well on those platforms, but I think the large majority of those people buy those platforms to show off what they can really do. They're looking at Destiny. They're looking at Helldivers. They're looking at Starfield. That they definitely push those. Yeah. It kind of enforces the idea that maybe things like Game Pass are one of the main reasons it's hurting in the long run.
Yeah. The simple thing is that the better way is to buy it up front or put hard cash on the individual titles and so forth. So one thing I was thinking about while you were reading that is we as an industry are not good at selling or reselling older titles. Like you think about, let's talk the MCU, right? You get to a certain point in the MCU and you can start selling off bundle packages of movies instead of individually or in a complete box set. So like, here's all the Iron Man movies, here's all the Captain America movies, here's all the Guardians of the Galaxy movies, and you can sell those at a bundle for more profit, but at a discounted price than you would have sold all three individually, but you never would have sold all three individually. Why don't we do that for Naughty Dog? Why don't we do that for Uncharted? Why don't we do that for the Final Fantasy VII collection or things like of that nature? Why are we not better at rotating our deals and our bundles together so that we can get some more revenue out of people? Now, they bring up the thing about time. Somebody's always got time. Somebody. Now, you are competing for everybody's time, but that only works in specific markets. There can only be so many live service games that are shooters, That's why, like, Helldivers, Fortnite, Call of Duty, Apex, they got it locked down. There's not too much room for anybody else in that market right now. But there's still a percentage of players who are more interested in indie games. Why are we not giving the Devolver Deluxe Pack, and it gives you Cult of the Lamb and what's that game? Evil West. My friend Pedro is what you just said, et cetera, et cetera. Like, why are we not bundling these things together a little bit better? In a way that can be like, oh, well, I do like, or my friend told me great things about these games, or I'm a fan of Naughty Dog, or I'm a fan of Santa Monica. So yeah, I'll buy the God of War collection real quick. Why are we not being better about putting collection packages together in the digital age? You know what I mean? In the physical one, okay, I kind of get it. It makes a little bit more sense as to why, like, okay, well, we need to bundle it together in a single disc and put the code together. But if you just sell me keys, you're just selling me keys to games. So just bundle them together and sell them at a discounted price than what they would have been with all three of them. And I'll buy the FromSoft collection for $150. Like, yeah, sure, fuck it. Like, let's explore the options more, is what I'm saying.
Well, the article mentioned, or Lowry mentioned, PS Plus.
Yeah.
That's a model that we hear all the bad stuff about Xbox Games Pass, there being a lot of detractors, even leading up to this. Who bitches about, PlayStation Plus with their free games they offer every month? Or so.
I mean, yeah, and how often are you going to download those games or whatever? And sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. It just depends on the game by game basis. One thing that I thought was interesting is at the start of this generation, PS5, they offered, I believe it was called the PlayStation Plus Collection, and it was a collection of games that you got access to by subscribing to PlayStation Plus at a certain tier level or whatever. That's an interesting idea. Why not make that? Give us that subscription services, and hey, every 3 months we are rotating a dozen games out. It's 12 games. You have the option to download and buy and play right now. Extra $20 a month. So maybe that kind of helps, and it gives us a circulation, and we only do it for titles that have been out for a certain amount of time or something like that. Or just, hey, $100 once every 3 months. Here's 5 games. That just aren't really selling like that anymore. Hey, guess what? God of War 2018 probably not selling that crazy much anymore. Let's sell that. In a bundle alongside Ghost of Tsushima, in a bundle alongside Death Stranding, in a bundle alongside, and you just rotate those things out as much as you want.
No matter how much you sell games to people, there's always going to be a population that do not play that when it comes out, and so
there's always more to buy from. There's a reason Grand Theft Auto 5 is in the top 10 games sold more often than it isn't, and it's because, hey, some of these kids are growing up and have never played Grand Theft Auto 5. So they're growing up and buying it, and that game is so popular that it continues to work that way. Let's get creative in the ways that we can make money outside of the traditional format of just charging for $70.
I think the best course is to do like Xbox Games Pass has done, but only for games that have been out for 2 years, maybe 1 year.
Day one, I think specifically is a mistake. So, Connor, where do you think Xbox goes specifically in this direction when it comes to Game Pass? Do they kill the program entirely, or maybe they just pull back on the day one releases for it?
It really depends on the stupidity of Microsoft. If they don't pull back, I don't see them doing anything other than just canceling the service outright.
Yeah.
It'd
if they go that route, I don't see why a gamer would want to sign up for Xbox.
Exactly. You're losing the console war. We talked about that 2 weeks ago, I believe now. It's
last week
too. Jesus. Yeah. Well, they're fucked on that account. So they need to make more games, which is going to be harder because they've canceled one of their potentially biggest new studios, Tango Gameworks. They eliminated any possibility for Arcane Austin to come back from Redfall and make the next big game. They're just on a spiral downwards.
And hopefully one day they'll be able to figure that out. But ladies and gentlemen, we're just going to have to wait and see. So this was a tough conversation. It was a little hard, and it's a little hard to roll out of it. And we're not rolling into the most positive conversations after this either. But it's a little more energetic and so forth. So after all of that, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for watching and listening. Please stick around for the Stellar Blade review. Let us know down in the comments how you felt about the conversation we all had today. That was a good conversation, despite how dour it was. Yeah. Make sure you like, subscribe, follow for more. Remember, you can catch this podcast every Tuesday, 8 a.m. Central Time, youtube.com/@2pennygames, and mainstream podcast services of your choice. Until next time, have a great time. And Connor, say goodbye to the people.
Thanks for watching, guys.
What's poppin', players? Welcome back to a 2-Penny Games review, this time for Stellar Blade. I am your host, Tavin Bothel, here with my co-host and good friend. Say hello to the people, Connor Elliott.
He calls me good friend, but I don't believe it.
We live together. How would you not be a good friend if we've known each other for well over a decade and we live together?
Maybe we're just you're just conveniently using me as a person to help pay the rent.
Maybe, you never know. Anyways, ladies and gentlemen, this is your review for Stellar Blade. I am your lead reviewer for it. Connor, have you played any Stellar Blade over these last couple of weeks?
Jack shit. I haven't played a single bit. When I first saw this game, I didn't think it was for me. I think it was piggybacking too much off of Nier Automata, and I didn't really see any gameplay that struck me as being...
Well, remember they had... Because this one's been gestating for a while, so it was initially known as, like, Project Eve.
Yeah.
Is what it initially went. And it sold itself as being, like, a character action game at first. And then I guess that changed along the way, or the marketing changed or whatever. So now it's more of a FromSoft-inspired action game with character action inspirations, and of course, a world design and general open world design of of a Nier Automata and so forth. So, ladies and gentlemen, Stellar Blade is all right. It's an all right game. I think its strongest suit is by far its combat and just its overall gameplay systems and designs. It's fun to play, and you look as you're fighting enemies and getting perfect parries and perfect dodges, you feel great. And as you're executing combos, you're feeling awesome. But overall, Stellar Blade fails to have a unique vision or just a unified design in any aspect of the game. If this game was just a linear single-player character action adventure with FromSoft styled combat, it would be so much better. But because it chooses to go down the route of an open world design, of a mission structure design, and its choice to have a focus on just what is quite plainly the most bland and plain narrative I've played this year, and it's just simply uninteresting. All of these elements kind of come together and lead you going, like, I'm just not having a great time with the package as a whole. When I am fighting, it's great. And those systems all feed into each other really well when it turns into the dashing, the different guard abilities that you can use, and like just the upgrade trees. The upgrade trees are really fun to explore and acquire new abilities and use them in combat and all that. I really, like, until the end of time, we'll sing the praises of the combat. But it's just the package as a whole is incredibly just not good. The world design is boring and bland, and it doesn't match the character design, which is colorful and wants to be kind of plucky and pop out at you, but the world of the game is so dour and drab and depressing that, like, these characters don't get the opportunity to show us why they're interesting. And on top of that, the music is fun and catchy and like is a fun little bop, has a fun little bop to it. But again, it doesn't work in the world that we are in. The enemy designs are ugly. Like, they're just not good to look at. Not in like they're gross sort of way, like a From Software has gross enemies. They just don't look good. They look boring and they look uninspired. And I guess that's the word I really am left with when I play Stellar Blade, is that this is uninspired. I think overall, this game needed... I don't know what happened in development, and I'm not going to pretend like, I can backseat develop these things, but it just feels like whoever was leading this project didn't have a complete vision for what they wanted and was making choices based off of other things that they liked and added all these things together, but they don't add together very well. Despite this combat team just popping the fuck off, because this combat really is really fun and really exciting to play through. And I'm walking away underwhelmed. I'm not going to say disappointed, but I am underwhelmed by Stellar Blade, and I wish it had a little bit more of the sauce in it.
From how you're talking about it, it seems like the direction given to the combat team was spot on, but everyone else just didn't really know what they were doing, because this is the first game from this studio, correct?
Yeah, it's a new Korean studio. I'm blanking on the name right now, but yeah, I'll say as a first game, it's quality. It really is quality, but like maybe our scope is too ambitious. I just don't understand why they went an open world route with it, and why they chose to have their world be so drab and like this like realistic post-apocalyptic setting. It just doesn't work. I would have really much rathered like a very linear game that like would just kind of open up into combat arenas, and one that had way more color, way more character, way more just pop and something to remember when I'm looking at this game. Because as of right now, all I remember is just the colorful ass and titties that it's throwing at the screen all the time. And that's something else I want to talk about when talking about this game.
Shift Up Corporation.
Shift Up, yeah. Decent game. I'd be interested to see what they learned from this. I want to step away from the game itself for a second. This is not something I like to do very often when I review games, but the conversation around this game has been volcanic, I'll say, or vitriolic at the very least. And I don't understand why. There was a conversation or some type of talk back and forth about how this game was being censored, or how like they were afraid to make Eve sexy in this game. they're not afraid to make Eve sexy in this game. She wears a skin-tight suit the whole time. Connor, in fact, you walked into my room one night when I was playing, and you just went, Jesus, because just in the open world running around, it's just ass, just in your screen. And it's just kind of like, all right, cool, we're going that route. And I don't have a problem with going that route. If you want to make your game super horny, make it super horny, whatever. It's not typically my style of games that I enjoy, but like I'm not going to ding you for that. However, this game is horny, and the conversation around it about how, they're censoring it, this, that, and the third, it just feels like a bunch of incel losers on the internet. And I'm talking to you, incels, where they were like, oh no, this is too far. Sony's doing too much. We need to fight for the right for this game. We need to free Stellar Blade. I think a hashtag was trending at one point. And guys, what the fuck are y'all talking about? Because it is just skin-tight suits and titties everywhere. Not just with Eve, but every other female character in the game just has their titties out. And it's distracting and awkward, and it leads into my criticism of like the clash of the game. Why in this post-apocalyptic world are all the men dressed like they're ready for a battle and that they're scavengers, but all the women are dressed in skin-tight stripper outfits?
I think part of what it comes from, and I said this at the beginning, because when I found out about the narrative of this game, it's a direct copy of Nier Automata. And, that's fine if you can do good with it. But one of the other elements of Nier Automata that was talked about a lot, and the director himself talked about it a lot as well, was the sensuality of the main character, 2B. She's kind of become an icon in just of how her design looks. She's hot, but it doesn't shove it in your face. You actually kind of have to do, camera angles. You probably know what that means, to see the naughtier bits. But it's not like front and center in your face. It seems like this game wanted to do what that game does and what people like, how people reacted to Lady Dimitrescu, and make a horny character, but they just didn't have any substance behind it.
I'm not kidding. Opening cutscene of this game, just a glamour shot of just like, look at the ass and look at the curves here. Like it's pretty ridiculous. And it's invasive. It gets in the way of the enjoyability of the game, I think. But like, it goes even further than that, because as I start unlocking more suits, they can just get hornier and hornier and hornier to the point to where they have a very unique collectible item in this game, where it's soda cans, because the world has ended, but soda cans are still around. And so you're collecting different soda cans in the game, and then the character does a cute little pose every time she finds one, and it's a unique pose every time. This is fun. I like this. This is cool.
I saw him.
The reward, Connor, for collecting every can in the game is a outfit for Eve where she is in lingerie. And I'm talking the most revealing lingerie I have seen. Like, it'll make porn stars blush. Like, what are we fucking doing here? And so, yeah, just the conversation around this game kind of killed like some of the anticipation for it. Because even if I did end up liking the game more than I do, like, y'all just turned it into, this is something I just want to jerk off to. And that is giving a discredit to what the game is actually trying to do, which is be a fun action game. And it is a fun action game. I'll say again, like, the way that, like, electricity and lightning, like, strikes off of the blade when you counter an enemy, and when you do, like, special combo moves where, like, you're, like, zipping around and dashing or slashing at dudes really quickly. Like, all of that's really cool. It feels good to play. There's some platforming elements in the game that I'm not super into. It's a little stiff in that element. But when you're fighting, it feels awesome. And I'll say something that is kind of letting the combat down, and what might be the worst part about this game is overall, is its production quality. Like, when a boss fight starts, they just kind of start. They don't have there's no intensity behind it. There's no build of music. There's no ominous, like, rising tension. It's a, like, you're walking down a street, a hard cut into a cutscene, big monster, like, explodes from some rubble, lands in front of you, and now you fight. Like, it's just the, like, laziest way to introduce boss fights is how these boss fights are introduced. Now, the quality of the boss fights are pretty solid. I enjoy them quite a bit. But none of them are super memorable, and I think that kind of falls into the enemy design where it's just kind of just bland. It's like tentacle monsters or like robot monsters or like a weird mesh between the two. And so, yeah, I'm just kind of like, all right. But the mechanics of each enemy type are good and are interesting.
So are the enemies like advanced alien species that allow them to have that mix of technology and organic material?
Yeah, I guess it just kind of depends. I mean, this story and just general world and background of the game is so like not thought through to the point to where it's just like, oh, these are just monster enemies that you just have to fight, basically. And so, you know, they come in like all kinds of shapes and sizes. But they all have like a general like just kind of gray/brown/black monster feel to them, and in different ways. And again, like mechanically, how they are each diverse is great, but just the look of them, they just don't look good. Like they look cheap. And the boss fights like start getting a little bit like crazier in the production value, and they start like upping it a little bit more, especially when you finally defeat these beasts. It's a cool cutscene of Eve, you know, cutting it up or whatever. But yeah, it's just honestly just one of the most uninspired games that I've played in a couple of years now, and it's disheartening to see it because I thought this one was gonna be not like a 10 out of 10 or anything, but I thought it was gonna be a bit of a banger. And like I just feel like if the overall design of the game had more focus, if they were like, why am I climbing towers in this game? Like, why is that a thing that's happening? If this was instead more focused like a Devil May Cry, and you could still keep the FromSoft, you know, kind of action-y elements of it. I do enjoy their version of bonfires are like these like little camps that you sit next to, and there's like a soda machine where you can buy items, and then like there's different computer screens where you unlock new abilities, which are all cool, or like upgrade your weapons and stuff like that, which is also interesting. And then like it's just like a little lounge chair that you'll just like sit in and chill in or whatever, and your characters will like converse over the radio here and stuff. So like these are all makings of things that could be dope, but then the execution of it just falls super flat. And it just feels a lot like, well, they did it here, so let's do it here, or they did it there, so let's do it here. And that is really just the crux of just like, you're not doing anything that makes you unique, and the unique elements of your game, you're letting them down because they're not implemented well with the other choices you're making.
Disappointing for you, because I remember you were gassing this game up.
Dude, the early combat gameplay demos and stuff look cool, and I was right to be excited about that because the combat is good. It feels really good. I can't like take away from that. But it's just the rest of it is just so, ugh. Like, I don't like looking at this game. I don't like being in its world. I don't particularly care for any individual element of this game other than the combat. Like, why are the characters so, like, colorful and they pop off the screen, but your world is so bland? And the juxtaposition of those things don't complement each other. You know how some games, like, juxtaposition actually complements? This is not the case here. Like it just feels like the entire game is the Corel version or area of Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, where it's just desert like all the fucking time and kind of bland to look at, mixed with like occasionally you enter a really high sci-fi technology-based area that you'll like run through or whatever. There are elements where they do try to change the gameplay up. These are a mixed bag for me. Sometimes it's through platforming, which I think is pretty bad. Sometimes it's through like little dungeons that'll have gimmicks or puzzle elements and so forth. For example, one of the early dungeons that you will go through, they basically turn your sword off, so you only have your gun. Which is not like the best weapon to use against some enemies. So it's an entire dungeon of just like balancing ammo and shooting enemies and getting accustomed to how the gunplay feels. And then there's some decent puzzles in there that, you know, you'll like, like there's like a laser beam, you have to get to a certain point of the room, so you have to use mirrors to deflect it and doing that. But like if you point the laser at the wrong thing, you could like activate a trap and enemies will pop out and fight you and stuff like that. So like there's like there's like some thought that has to go into it to avoid being punished. That's pretty cool. But it's too far and few between, and it pulls you away from what's really good about the game for so long that you end up like if you stop playing, if you end your play session in one of these dungeons, you dread going back to the game. And like it literally, like I did that where like I was like, oh, I gotta get through this shooting maze thing and do these puzzles. Okay, whatever. And then I did it, and then I got back to the general gameplay loop, and then the game started working for me again. And I'll say like, just overall, just not the feeling of and just the mismatching of elemental designs in this game. Like it just kind of turned me off to it, and it made me like crave something that was doing what this game does, but just so much better. And I ended up, even though I didn't like the game when it first came out, I ended up downloading and playing Elden Ring. And I've started playing a new campaign in Elden Ring, and I'm like 6 hours deeper into that. And I'm having a way better time with that than I ever had here in Stellar Blade. Even though the combat I probably like more in Stellar Blade, but like it's just the overall package of Elden Ring is just so artisanal and so masterfully crafted that like it's undeniable. Like the gap in quality FromSoft is from just the rest of the industry in terms of these action games and so forth. So yeah, man, Stellar Blade. If you are interested in it, like I do think it's worth playing and checking out. Unlike. I don't think Rise of the Ronin was super worth checking out, but this one I think could be. But overall, like it's just not the best bang for your buck. At the end of the day, like it's just okay. It's all right. So,
I think the last thing I could say about this is you were criticizing like the incels who were upset about the censorship.
Yeah, y'all are fucking losers.
Well, the good thing I could say about towards those people is look forward to the SFM porn. At least you'll have that to look forward to. You got something if you were disappointed with what they did. So,
Ladies and gentlemen, that is going to be your review for Stellar Blade. Let me know down in the comments how you felt about the game. Are you higher on it? Are you lower on it? Let me know. Does any of these points make sense, or are you feeling a different way? Drop down comments in the comment section down below. But until next time, have a great time. And Connor, say goodbye to the people.
Bye, people. Bye.